page that I just gave out was prepared many years ago when I had a different email, so that email is no longer relevant. But what is Makam? It's Michlalot Morim, teachers' colleges. So all the teachers, then I was teaching in Lifshitz College, so the email that they gave to everybody was Makam, Michlalot Morim. Right, AC, right, it was AC, right. Right. Then they merged together with the Herzog College from Malon Shvut, and then I got my own private, Gmail, and I was no longer a AC. Right. Hi, how are you? There's a new page on the table over there. Right, so just ignore that email address. Don't write to me there. It's just going to go into cyberspace. It's irrelevant, or as they say in this country, lo relevanti. Lo relevanti. It's an old email address that was now defunct. So the only thing not defunct about it is the sources. The sources are forever. And before the share starts, so I always love to re-quote the last epilogue in my first book on the Rav's Conversations, where I lifted out of context the speech that the Rav gave in 1957 at a Mizrahi convention, where he was marveling at the flight between Boston and New York. I mean, that whole book was about conversations in transit. So here the Rav is flying in the late 50s. That's when it all started, the traveling by plane. Because before that, he drove each time. He didn't drive, he was driven. So he's talking about, the Rav knew science, he knew physics, he knew why a plane flies. He understood all that. And he said it was still a marvel and so on. Europe, you spend it in the air. And then the plane lands in LaGuardia, and he's driven to the yeshiva, and he enters into the halls of Abaya and Rava, where the discussions are the same as in Surah and Pumpadita. And here I feel at home because I'm grounded in eternity. It's such a great ending. Grounded in eternity. The shir didn't start yet, don't worry. There are pages on the table. Take a source page. One more minute. I always quote the famous line of Rav Yosef Breuer Zatzal, Früh is auch nicht pünktlich. Early is also not on time. I mean, that's a class A yeka. On time is on time. Nah. That's punishing everybody who comes on time. It's not fair. Not. Boker Tov, and welcome everybody back. I've been out for since Pesach because of being away. This year, as usual, for the entire year, is being dedicated in memory of Elisheva Frist, Elisheva Sima, Bat Zalman, Zechuna Livracha, by the Frist family. And I also was informed of a special acknowledgement for this particular year today, a sponsorship by Rosina Fisher for the Aliyat Neshama of our husband, Mordechai Avigdor Ben Peretz, Zechuna Livracha, and our parents, Chia Esther Bat Yerachmiel Yisachar HaKohen, Alea Shalom, and Yitzchak Ben Yehuda, Zechuna Livracha. Okay. I know people use the term Aliyat Neshama, and it's a Kabbalistic idea. I don't have a clue what it means. I'm first to admit it. I don't have a clue what that means. Neshama goes up. We can say it in the language of a second grader. The Neshama goes up. But what does that mean in a world of spirituality, of spiritual existence? We don't know. I always repeat my father, Olav Shalom, who used to say, when he came in Aliyah in 1993, he felt his Neshama had an Aliyah. And the truth is that I can explain in halachic categories what that means. When a person comes to Eretz Yisrael, there's a different spiritual / halachic dimension to a person's religious life, and there one can talk about a aliyat neshama. Did I not speak about Aliyah? Of course I spoke about Aliyah. So I'm going to repeat to you something that was a little bit straddling the line of political correctness, but I decided, it was my last speech, my swan song, which was after 12 other speeches. So my 13th speech was I was a keynote speaker for the evening of Yom Ha'atzmaut at the main davening of the Mizrahi Center with packed shul. I mean, it was literally standing room only, packed shul. And here I have this opportunity. I have everybody, in the palm of the hand to say something. It's a community that, in a very positive sense, sports no small number of Olim Chadashim. Our lady at the table, at the entrance, is one of them. Came from Melbourne. There are many young people who came over to me during my 5-day stay. They're coming on Aliyah in a week, in 2 weeks, whatever, talking to me about their plans. And it's very heartwarming to know that it's a community that you can talk about Aliyah openly, and they're very receptive to hearing the message. So on the night of Yom Ha'atzmaut, I said how happy I was to join them in Yom Ha'atzmaut in a community that's so proud to have so many people who've chosen to go on Aliyah. But let the record stand that those who haven't gone have chosen not to go. Ooh. Now, I knew that I was punching a little bit below the belt, but I wanted to say it, and people came over me afterwards and they said, it was important that somebody came from Eretz Israel and told them that. And just reminded them. I said, for 1900 years, you could have all the great desire to go to Eretz Israel, you just couldn't do it. There were a zillion legitimate reasons why you couldn't do it. Now, the legitimate reasons are melting away, and basically, people are deciding not to go on Aliyah. They have to understand that. It's a decision that they're making. They may not have gotten up in the morning and said, not to go on Aliyah. But that's basically what it is, and it was important that they hear it. The anti-Semitism on campus of the States, Baruch Hashem, has arrived to Melbourne University. Same thing, encampments, PLO encampments, and so on. It's all there. It's all over the world. And I always, when I quote my son Eitan, who had this great drasha, Ani Hashem bi'ita achishana, bi'ita means be'et, in its time, I will hasten the Gula. He says you can read the word with a tet, which is bi'ita, get a kick. When the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives Am Yisrael a kick, achishana, then things are going to start moving. Well, the kick has arrived. It has arrived big time. And I saw it. I was on the Arizona State University campus the week before speaking about Rambam, what else? And that was one of the places that had trouble with police and everything. The only trouble I had was a Yoredet, a woman from Tel Aviv who batted lefty politically and just decided to just let it all out at me and told me that I and people like me are destroying this country. That's what she said. I felt bad. I thought she had a stomach ache, and she said that it was because I put Ben-Gvir in. I said, "Hey, lady, I voted for Gantz. And you don't go to the army. Excuse me. I did 16 years in the Chel Avir. I'm not going to tell you what I did there, but." And my kids went to the army. They're still in the army. What are you hacking me? She just let it out. We're destroying the world. You mitnachalim. I said, I live in Katamon. I'm not in Bethel. I have no problems with Bethel. Don't get me wrong. But, you could see the stereotyping. Somebody just let it all out. So with that woman, I had some issues. But I didn't have any problems with anybody else. Otherwise, it was fine. Okay. Today and next week, yeah. It was at the Arizona State University. It was a conference on Jewish studies, of all things. So, Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah. Lovely hot town. Right, 32 degrees in the shade. Right. No, in the daytime, it was nice. Anyway, today and next week, we're going to deal with the topic of how phrases of Tanakh impacted on Nusach HaTfilah. So Anshe Knesset Gdolah authored the basic Siddur, but then you have all these add-ons. I mean, you open up the Siddur for Shabbat, obviously, Kela Dona Kol HaMaasim, that's a song, the piyut, that enters into the Siddur. And things of that nature, all kinds of Lechadodi is a piyut that enters in the 16th century by Reb Shlomo Alevi Al-Kevatz from the Kabbalists of Tzfat. So it's part of the Siddur now. And it is important to know, what came first, what was the nucleus of the Siddur, and all the add-ons. They sometimes have different halachic differences to them. So we're going to see that whether it was the Anshe Knesset Gdolah of 2,500 years ago, or the Paitanim of of most recent times, I don't think I can get a better tefillah that entered into the SIDDUR of many communities, not all communities, but many communities, the tefillah l'shlom hamdina, the tefillah for the welfare of the state of Israel, where the author officially is Rav Herzog, the second Ashkenazi chief rabbi, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog Zatzal. Why do I say officially? Because he was asked by Ben Gurion almost a day or two before the announcement of the state, 76 years ago, on the 5th of Iyar, 48, that we have to have a tefillah. And Rav Herzog knew this is going to be historic and didn't want to, write a text that he's going to have to change and change and change. He wanted it to flow correctly. So he took counsel by Shai Agnon. We found out about this not so long ago, where Agnon's daughter moves, and you know what happens when you move? You clean out every piece of paper in a drawer, and they discovered pieces of paper that had drafts of the Tefillah L'Shlom Hamdina, and it turns out that Agnon suggested a draft to Rav Herzog, and then Rav Herzog polishes it up at the end. But Rav Herzog told Agnon, these are the ideas that I'd like incorporated into this tefillah. It reminds me exactly of what happened with the bracha of V'la Malshinim. Now, we have in the Shmon Esrei, so we call Shmon Esrei, and start counting from the first to the end, and you're going to get 19. So you figured you messed up, right? So you count it again, and it's 19. And you count it a third time, and you realize it's 19. So why is it called Shmon Esrei? 18. Because once upon a time it was 18. And it was 18 from the days of Chazal, of the Anshe Knesset Gdolah. But then there was an add-on, a bracha was added on, and it was added on at the time of before the Churban, where we had issues with the early Hebrew Christians. So the Christianity is an outgrowth of Judaism, where it was a sect. We had different sectarian movements in Bayit Sheni. Most prominent was the Sadducean sect, the Tzdokim, who Chazal had really to deal with, and they dealt with on various levels. One of the big issues was Sfirat Omer, what exactly does the Torah mean when it says Mimochorat HaShabbat, Usfartem Lechem Mimochorat HaShabbat, you shall start counting the day after Shabbat. And the Tzdokim said, well, we know what that is, it's Sunday, it's Yom Rishon. And our Chachamim had a tradition from the oral law that it's the day after the first day of Pesach, which means the 16th of Nisan, no matter when it comes out during the week. So Shavuot is always 50 days later. So according to our calendar, Shavuot is 50 days after the 16th of Nisan. But according to the Tzdokim, it always came out on a Sunday. Because if you start counting on Sunday, so day 1 Sunday, day 50 is going to be Sunday. And so much so, the Gemara reports that one of the elder Tzdoki says, well, Rosh Rabbeinu, he was a Ohev Yisrael. He really was a nice guy because he created a long weekend. Because a long weekend, you always had Shabbos Sunday, for Shavuos. Beseda. So we had to deal with the Tzdokim on an intellectual level. Beseda. But there was also the sect that morphs into Christianity, and they were the Minim. And the word Minim was, who are they? It's almost like the word man in the desert. We lo yadu mahu, didn't know what it was. Here was Minim, lo yada mihu, didn't know who he was. Didn't know who they were. What does that mean? It means they were coming to Shul to daven. They were like part of the minyan, religious Jews, very religious Jews. They were going to the mikvah a lot, and so much so that this led, and I'm going to say this with a little bit mechila, this led a very distinguished professor of Jewish history from Yeshiva University. He's a Musmach and a Talmud Chacham, Professor David Berger, to put out a book to suggest, if we want to look back 1900 years, or almost 2,000 years, and see who were the Jews who were really the first generation of early Christians. Who did they look like if we just examine today, what the Jewish people look like? Were they Orthodox Jews? Were they Reformed Jews? Were they conservative Jews? If they were within Orthodoxy, who were they? Were they Chassidim? Were they Misnagdim? Were they Bnei Akiva? Were they Haredim? Who were they? Where can we place them? And he comes up with an answer that shocked a lot of people. He says they were Lubavitcher Hasidim. And the reason he said that, because today when we think Lubavitcher Hasidim, we have such a positive take on Lubavitcher Hasidim because you get stuck anywhere in the world. So we know that three things made it to every corner of the world: CNN, Coca-Cola, and Chabad. So you can't miss. They're going to be there to help you, for Hachnasat Orchim, for this, for that. That we know. So that aspect of Chabad is unchallenged. But the theology of Chabad, of trying to see the Rebbe as Mashiach and all that kind of stuff, so this is a big problem. It's a major problem. One second, they're Shomer Torah Mitzvot. So were the first generation Hebrew Christians. So much so, we couldn't even identify. They didn't walk around with a badge, I believe in Yeshu. They didn't walk around with such a badge. And therefore, we didn't know how to deal with them. And Chazal made a bracha to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to annihilate them. That's what the bracha is. It's a harsh bracha. Ta'aker, u'tshaber, u'tmager, b'tachniya, b'me'era b'yameinu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should deal a death blow to them. So in our SIDDUR, it says, V'la malshinim al tihi tikva. And it's so printed in the standard Rambams. But you've heard from me more than once that the standard Rambams is the last edition of the Rambam that I'm going to use, because today we have access to so many manuscripts of Rambam, and we can get the Rambam that he really wrote, not the ones that were doctored up because of censorship. The Rambam wrote, La mishumadim al tehi tikva. What's a mishumad? Mishumad, for the word shmad. So it meant here somebody who went over to the other side religiously. Somebody who's hit Natzer, became Christian, or hit Aslem, became Muslim. So that's a mishumad. So the bracha began with La mishumadim al tehi tikva, Valaminim kerega yovedu. So some nuschot today begin with Alaminim, some begin with La malshinim al tehi tikva. So this bracha has been doctored up. But who wrote that bracha? So the Gemara says, Shmuel HaKatan. Shmuel HaKatan, an unknown figure in the days of the Gemara. He was the one who authored it, a very humble person. And if you want to know why it became important to identify who he was and why the bracha was accepted, the Rav Zechron the bracha of Soloveitchik was maspid, and a very, very important individual in his life, Reb Chaim Heller Zatzal, who he got to know in Berlin as an older person, and then in the States the tables turned around and Reb Chaim Heller saw himself as a Talmud of the Rav. But he passed away in 1962, and the Rav gave a hesped called Pleitat Sofreihem. It's in the print in one of the anthologies, and in that hesped he talks about the nature of Shmuel HaKatan and why he. But if you open up a Rambam, the second chapter of Hilchot Tfilah, he doesn't say Shmuel HaKatan. He says, B'mei Rabban Gamliel u'Beit Dino. In the days of Rabban Gamliel and his Sanhedrin, they instituted the bracha of V'la mishumadim or La mashinim. So why is that so? Let's get it right. Who authored the bracha? So the answer is, the text itself came from this Shmuel HaKatan. But Shmuel HaKatan did not have the authority to authorize a new bracha and integrate it into Shmoneh Esrei. Who was able to do it? The Sanhedrin can do it. So the official launching of this bracha was done by the Sanhedrin. Chazal, so that's what the Rambam says. B'mei Rabban Gamliel Beit Dino, they were the ones who authorized this extra bracha. But Chazal were asking, who's the real author? It's very similar to the Tfilah L'Shlom HaMdina, where Achenu K'Beit Yisrael and Tunim Aser B'Shevia. I'm sorry. Avinu Shevashamayim Tzur Yisrael V'Goalo B'Echet Minat Yisrael Rishit Tzmichat Gulatenu Again LaBevrat Chazecha. It's Agnon who wrote those words, but Rav Herzog was chief rabbi, and the Rabbanut Rashit officially issues this as the official Tfilah L'Shlom HaMdina. So you have this a parallel analogy to the bracha of V'la mashinim. I'll just say a word that when the Rambam writes, and then in the days of Rabban Gamliel and his Beit Din, they added this bracha, so now it comes out there are 19. Okay, I think everybody can do the math. 18 plus 1 is 19. Why does the Rambam have to, quote unquote, waste all of our time to teach us this simple addition of 18 plus 1 is 19? And he uses the word nimtza. It comes out. So I have a whole chapter in my book in the Rambam what a Rambam is doing with that word nimtza, and it comes out where it's so simple, so elementary, and so unnecessary apparently. But what the Rambam is doing is teaching us that what we now have is a complete unit. So we shouldn't think that our Shmoneh Esrei is two component parts, 18 plus 1, and the plus 1 might have different status, perhaps a lower status. The Rambam is teaching us that the 19th bracha is now equivalent to all the other 18. And that's why Nimtzat comes out. We have now 19 brachot of equal weight and equal value. Rambam says it with regard to the 7 mitzvot of Noach. So he believes, there's a little machloket on this, but the Rambam takes the point, the stand, that Adam Rishon had 6 of the 7 already, and then Noach was added the 7th of Eva Minachai, not to eat a limb of an animal that's still alive. So he says, now it comes out, Nimtzah comes out, there's 7 mitzvot. Okay, I think I could have figured that out too. 6 plus 1 is 7. The Rambam tells us to teach us that all 7 have the exact same status in halacha of the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, and so on. There are numerous examples in the Mishnah Torah where he uses that word nimtza for that specific purpose. But I get back to tefillah le Shlom Hamdina. So what you have is citations of psukim of the idea of integrating psukim into a nusach of a tefillah is not new, but it's actually something very old. It takes us back to Anshe Knesset Gdolah, when we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu v'lekei avotenu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Straight out of Shmot, Perek Gimel, straight out of, and the Kel HaGadol Gibor v'Norah Kel Elyon, that's also from Avram Avinu, Kel Elyon. The idea of many brachot that have biblical inspiration to them. So that's already the formal Anshe Knesset Gdolah. Next we're going to talk about Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech that we say every morning. Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview. The pasuk in Yeshayahu is Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Ra, evil. Now we don't say that. We say Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Et Hakol. We somehow soften the blow and change the word Ra to mean everything. It's like a euphemistic, we don't want to say the word Ra. We don't want to say it, but that's what it means. So there's an equation in that pasuk in Yeshayahu with Or and Tov, and Choshech and Ra. And to that end, we're going to develop this next week, what Anshe Knesset Gdolah had in mind by instituting this as the first bracha of Kriyat Shema every single morning. So the Paitanim of later did the same thing. So if you look at source number 1, so these psukim from Yeshayahu, source 1, source 2, source 3, all from Yeshayahu Hanavi, Hitnari meyafa kumi shvi Yerushalayim hitpatri, and the next one, Hitori kumi Yerushalayim, and next one, Yaminu smol tifrotzi kiloti voshi veloti kolmi ve'alti kolmi. I mean, you see that Shlomo Levi Alkavatz, in composing the Lecha Dodi, has the book of Yeshayahu wide open, and what he's doing is what we call in computer language, cut and paste. He's literally lifting out of context phrases from Yeshayahu and grafting it upon his song, because what the message of Lecha Dodi, when we say Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla, so who is the kala and who is the Dodi? So the Dodi is a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We know Lecha Dodi, we know that from Shir HaShirim, and there were many people who said Shir HaShirim before davening Friday night. That we know. So Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabla. Who is the kala? The kala is the Kedushat Shabbat. You have here the Shechina, the presence of God, coming in with Shabbat to our homes, and we're welcoming. In the days of the Gemara, there was a phrase: "Boi netzei likrat Shabbat malkita." Let's go to the field. And in which direction did they go out to the field? To the west, because that's where the sun set. And the moment of the setting of the sun, that was the onset of Shabbat, because that's the way it works. The Vayerev Vayivoker Yom Echad. So Vayerev Voker Yom Shishi. So at the moment of the beginning of Erev, which is sundown, that's when the Kedushat Shabbat. So let's go out the field and sense and experience the exact moment where the sanctity of Shabbat enters. Now, we don't run out to the field, but in Tzfat, they used to go out of the shul, also in the direction of the west, and we morphed into the popular minhag of turning around when we say Boi v'shalom ateret va'ala, and looking at the door. Now, you have to realize this minhag develops in Europe, where the shuls faced east, Mizrach, because that's where Yerushalayim was. It just so happens that if you go to Europe and you face Mizrach, you're going to be off Yerushalayim by quite a few angles. Yeah, but it didn't have to be exact. I mean, I have a Kotel compass on the phone. So wherever I am in the world, you can just push a button and you know exactly where the direction of Har HaBayit is, no matter where you are. But, it's Be'erech, so they knew that if you're in Europe, you weren't north, you weren't south, you weren't west, so what was left was east. So Mizrach became the direction that we daven. So if that was the case, they used to build the shuls where the Aron Kodesh was in the Mizrach, and that's why there were seats next to the Aron Kodesh for the honored people of the shul. Sometimes it was the Rabbanim, sometimes it was the Zkenim, elders of the community. And then if such a person passed away, it became an issue of who inherited that. There were a lot of blood spilt on who was going to sit in that seat. Two brothers, warring at each other and going to Din Tyrus, who gets the seat of what's called the Mizrach Vant, the seat at the wall of the Mizrach. So you have the Mizrach. So where was the door to get into the shul? The opposite. He came in the opposite. That was the west. So people would turn around basically to the west and take a step forward to the door as if we're going out to welcoming Shabbat. Almost like if you have a very important guest coming, so you hear that the car pulled up or something pulled up, so you go to the door, you welcome them. It's an honorable thing to do. So we're basically welcoming a Kadosh Baruch Hu into our midst on Shabbat. The Shekhinah, the presence of God, comes in, and that's the Boi V'Shalom Ateret Ba'ala, and so on. The problem comes up if the shul is structured in a way where the back door is not the west. So where do you turn around to? So that led to, Baruch Hashem, a machloket, right? Right? Some say you turn west no matter where the door is, and some say you always got to turn to the back door. And some just turned around no matter what. So the turning around was neither to the west nor to the back door, and it just became a type of gesture of turning around because their grandfather in Europe turned around. Of course, the reason why he turned around is because he turned to the west and to the door. And here you could have a shul if you live in Gush Etzion, so the Aron Kodesh should be north because you're south of, and if you live in Betel, your Aron Kodesh should be south because you're now north of Yerushalayim. And if you're in Ma'ale Adumim, your Aron Kodesh should be west. That's what it should be, because that's the way it is. You face Yerushalayim. So obviously, if you're in Tel Aviv, you're also pointing Mizrach, but not in Beersheba, not in Afula, or in the Golan. So you have to know where you are in Eretz Yisrael. And then the turning around also becomes interesting. What I find sometimes is that a shul does what it does, irrespective if they're playing the rules correctly, and you always have one or two tzaddikim, who do things differently. I have a problem with that, because there's a thing called Al Tifrosh Min HaTzibur. Even if the kehillah is doing it wrong, it's not the worst thing in the world, and I don't think a person should stand out on that level. What I do is, where I daven Friday night, they do it wrong, and I turn around with everybody, and then just as the last second, I just gesture with my head to the door, and I say, Boi V'Shalom. So I try to get it in anyway, but in terms of the physical turnaround, I don't want to stand out. I don't think it's right. But all of these phrases from Yeshayahu speak about, if you look at the chapters, Nun Bet, Nun Aleph, Nun Dalid, from chapter Mem until the end of the book, Samach Vav, Yeshayahu was talking about Geula, redemption, and what the Kabbalists was suggesting is that there's something about the spirit of the end of days, Acharit HaYamim, every single Shabbat. Me'ein olam haba yom Shabbat menucha. We sing it in the Zmirot. There's something about the spirit of the future existence integrated into every single Shabbos. And that's what the Kabbalists were doing. They were teaching us that there's something about Acharit HaYamim, something about the end of days, and that's why his creative use of phrases from Yeshayahu Navi, from the last part of Yeshayahu Navi, that deal with the Geula of Am Yisrael. So it's just beautifully done. So obviously, a person who does Lecha Dodi, is supposed to remember the sections in Yeshayahu that trigger these sensations of, wow, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. And Shlomo Alevi Al-Kabatz is saying, hello, it is great, it's Shabbat. It's Shabbat, it's Shabbat. It's Yom Shabbat Menucha L'Chayei Olamim. And then if we look at source number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, that comes from another poem, and that's the poem that we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Unetana Tokef Kedushat Hayom. I can tell you that the Rav once said, even though the Vilna Gaon had this serious objection to the integrating of poetry into the official davenings of Anshe Knesset Gdolah. I mean, it's one thing to to have Yigdal or Adon Olam at the end of davening or before davening, that's sad. You can say whatever you want. But El Chadodi is also not an integral part of davening. It's a type of psukkah de zimra for Kabbalat Shabbat, because Kabbalat Shabbat really is Mizmashil Yom Shabbat, and then after Baruch Hu, the brachot of Shema Shema and the brachot. So we want to say El Chadodi, no problem. But Anatana Tokev is very much part of the Chazarat HaShatz. Chazan is repeating Shemona Esrei of Musaf or Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and all of a sudden we have the Natan Tokef. So Rav said, despite of the fact that he agreed fundamentally with the Vilna Gaon's approach of not integrating the Chazarat HaShatz with poetry, he said, what would Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur davening be without Unatana Tokef? He felt it was such a central poem that he was willing to look aside at the Vilna Gaon's objections and say and incorporate it. And indeed, in his Beit Midrash, they did say, in Boston, they did say Unatana Tokef. So there, even though the printer sometimes prints one section with large letters and the next section with smaller letters, and the Chazan stops at a certain point and then the Kahal keeps going, that's just a device of how we say it. But it's all one long poem from Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom, which ends with Kedusha. It ends with the Kedusha of Musaf, of Kakatuv al Yad V'yecha V'kara Zel Zev Yamar. Now what you have right before that is Ein Kitzva Lishnotecha Ve'ein Kates La'orach Yamecha. We speak about a Kadosh Baruch Hu who's forever, who is eternal. Ein Kates Lishnotecha, there's no end to his days. Ve'ein Kates La'orach Yamecha, there's no end to his existence, and so on. Now that comes as a spin-off after we've just talked about the mortality of man. And we speak about Adam Yisodo Me'afar V'sofo Le'afar. Right? A person comes from dust, will end up in the dust. B'nafsho Yavi Lachmo, he tries his way, puts out his kishkis to make it through life. B'nafsho Yavi Lachmo. And he's compared to Mashul, Kecheres HaNishbar, like a vessel that's shattered, a Chatzir Novel, it's something that grew, that withered, a plant that withered, a flower that withered. It says a kitzel over, a shadow that just goes by. Anan kala, a cloud that dissipates. Chalom yauf, a fleeting dream. All kinds of different phrases are used there. I think I counted it once. It was 7 different phrases which seem to be saying the same thing. And they were talking about temporariness of man, the temporal state of man, that it's not forever. And we say it in various ways. So I remember speaking about this in 1988, my first drasha in Ramot, when I came from Beersheva, on the night of Yom Kippur, and I didn't have access at that moment to the Project Hashut, the Responsa project of Bar Ilan on my computer, but I did have a daughter who knew Tanakh by heart, and I said, you can just give me the source material for all these phrases. She knew 5 out of 7 without batting an eyelash, which was pretty good. I don't think I could do that now myself. So if you look at the sources of number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, you get where these phrases come from. One of those most difficult was where it says Mashul Kecheres HaNishbar, a earthen kli that was shattered. But in Vayikra, Perek Vav, it says Ukli Cheres Asher Tevashel Bo Yishaver. The phrase Kli Cheres, an earthenware that's shattered, is there in a different context. But then in Yeshayahu, Perek Mem, in source number 5, you have Yavesh Chatzir Navel Tzitz. So that's there, and it's repeated in the next pasuk. Yavesh Chatzir Navel Tzitz. This is the withering away of flowers or things that grew. And then in source 6, you have from Tehillim, Adam lehevel dama. Yamav, his days are kitzel over, like a shadow that just goes away. In Iyov, in source number 7, Kala Anan is the cloud has dissipated. In source 8, Vayal Avak. This is the one that says Avak Poreach in the Natan Tokef. And the only place in Tanakh that I found Avak Poreach was in the Makav Shchin, where it says Vaya le'avak al kol eretz Mitzrayim, Vaya al adam v'al abima l'shchin poreach avabuot b'chol eretz Mitzrayim. So there you have avak poreach. In Iyov again in source number 9, Chalom Ya'uf, a fleeting dream. And my question that I asked in the drasha was, why did the Paitan think it was necessary to sift through Tanakh and give us 7 different expressions that are telling us the same thing? And this all ends with Vatahu Melech El Chai V'Kayam. You, God, you're the King forever. Ein kitzval d'shnotecha ve'ein kates le'orach yamecha. You're eternal, and so on. Okay, so why do we have 7 different expressions? And I think the answer is, and it's a very somber thought, while everybody is going to end their life here on this world at some time and occasion, people leave in different circumstances. Very, very different circumstances. There are people who slowly drift away, and there are people who it's very, very sudden. It could be a pigua, it could be an accident, very, very sudden. A moment ago, a person was a kli, a vessel, worthy of use and beautiful and everything. The next second, it's cheres hanishbar, it's shattered. And then you can have somebody who, if you ever go to the kotel and you see at 12 o'clock, you stand there till 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, you can see eventually the shadow, take place. But it's so slow. It's very gradual. You don't notice it from minute to minute, for sure not. That's kitzel over. Right? Person is lingering on. You don't see any noticeable depreciation of health from day to day. But, I haven't seen this person for 2 years. Well, really, it looked like there was a decline. Right, so after 2 years, you can measure the decline, but not day to day. That's ketzel over, and so on. So every single one of these expressions give us some type of awareness of different ways of exiting the world. Why did the Paitanim use psukim from Tanakh? Well, they were taking the cue from Anshe Knesset Gdolah, who also used psukim from Tanakh to integrate into their tefillah. And I remember the Rabbi saying this on a Tisha B'Av when he had a problem with modern day kinot. He had a problem with it. He believed that in the days of the Rishonim, in the Middle Ages, they were still endowed with that level of Ruach HaKodesh that allowed for the authorship of the kinot that were put together for Tisha B'Av. But he didn't think that modern people had that at all. Even though, in my humble opinion, there are some very powerful kinot for the Shoah that obviously were authored in the modern age. Some very, very powerful ones. People who did have a handle on the Hebrew, who did integrate psukim from Tanakh into their expression of the Shoah for Tisha B'Av. And what's interesting, in the official OU print edition of the keynote for Tisha B'Av, and we're sitting right now in the OU building, and it's a wonderful edition, translated nicely with annotation and so on, and they have a nice introduction, and whoever wrote the introduction, I think it was Rabbi Chatzka Luxstein, and writes that the Rav had a problem with these additional modern day keynote. In that very edition, they have 5 versions of keynote for the Shoah. In the very, very edition. I thought that was very telling, which was they understood that Kvodo b'mkomo munach, the Rav had a shita, had an opinion, except that Am Yisrael voted against it. Am Yisrael was interested that there should be a type of expression for the Shoah. And the truth of the matter is, there were keynote written after the 1648 pogroms, the Chelmenishke pogroms, what we called Ksirot Tach V'Tat, Tavchet and Tavtet, where in the Ukraine, the Ukrainians weren't our biggest friends historically, we should know that, without getting into the modern day politics. And over 100,000 Jews lost their lives in the Gzerot Tach V'Tat. So the Va'ad Arba Aratzot, which was a type of communal rabbinic lay leadership get-together of people that met in Lublin for many years, and it covered 4 different areas of Eastern Europe, they ordained that on the 20th of Sivan, there should be a public fast day. We don't have that today. Most people don't even know about it. Some people still say the slichot. There are slichot that were authored for the Gzerot Tach V'Tat. One of those was the Tosfot Yom Tov, of Yom Tov Lippman Hella, and his perush on the Mishnah before the invention of Kahati was like one of the most important perushim on Mishnah that was available. And he's one of the authors of one of the kinot for Chaf Sivan. So it was done. And Rabbi Feinstein was asked, 1 second, if they made a public fast day for the Gzerot Tach V'Tat, why did they make a public fast day for the Shoah? Which is a very good question. Rabbi Feinstein tries to wiggle out of that. Of course, the real answer is because there's no authority to do so. That's why, because every Rav will say what he says, and nobody's going to listen to it. So it wouldn't carry any weight. But the idea that the Rav felt that by the using of statements of Tanakh, this embellishes the poem and gives it some spiritual weight. So that's something that the greats of the Middle Ages did do, integrating the psukim, as you see in the Yonatan Tokef, which is a product of the Middle Ages. Yeah. Right, so for Asara B'Tevet, so the Rabbanut HaRashit decided to do something anyway for the Shoah and piggyback on an existing tzom, Asara B'Tevet. They figured they'll get more people known and interested in what happened in Asara B'Tevet, and we'll also have the Yom HaKadosh HaKlali, and so on. So the problem with Yom HaKadosh HaKlali is the original institution was that those people who lost members of the family, and we don't know when it was, so we'll all say Kaddish together. I remember back in the States where they didn't have Asara B'Tevet, those people, and there were plenty. I lived in Borough Park. We had plenty of people who were from Hungarian Jewish families, and they lost their parents, and they either said Kaddish on Yom Kippur or they said Kaddish on Tisha B'Av. Both equally, good dates to pick a date to say a Kaddish for Kedoshim, no doubt. But here in Eretz Yisrael, it became the Asara B'Tevet. What's the problem? That's over 80 years from the Shoah. The available people who are Holocaust family survivors are no longer with us any longer, and you hardly have people in shuls today saying Kaddish. In the 50s, people told me in Tel Aviv, everybody said Kaddish because everybody was from Holocaust families. And today, you don't have that. So there was a suggestion that the Rabbanut should ordain that second generationers should pick it up. I'd be in favor of that, but they didn't do it yet. They didn't do it yet. If they don't do it, then it's just going to die out. The Yom Kaddish HaKlali is going to die out. I think there's some merit that the second generationers should pick up. I mean, it's no different than even on a private level. I remember my father, Shalom, would say Kaddish on the day that his father said Kaddish for his father when my grandfather passed away. So he took upon himself. Okay, so I saw that my father did that, so I did the same thing for my grandfather when my father passed away. So I would say Kaddish for the day of his yard site. The Rav once said that if you're saying Kaddish for somebody who's not your parents, it's sufficient just to say the Aleinu L'Shabeach Kaddish for each davening, and not to say every single time Kaddish Yatom. So I'm actually doing this now. I don't know if you know, the World Mizrahi with a very interesting movement started during the war now to see if there were people who perished on Simchat Torah who left nobody to say Kaddish for. And unfortunately, there were quite a few. So I'm saying Kaddish for somebody who I never knew, a fellow who came from a Russian Olim family. He lived in Carmiel. He was 28 years old. His name was Slava, and he perished. He fell on day one of Simchat Torah. And I have his picture. I have his name. I knew who he was, and I say Kaddish for him. That's all. It's as simple as that. I'm not giving myself a kacha. I'm just telling you that it's being done, and I say Kaddish for Aleinu L'Shabeach. And that's important. It's just a connection, just to know that there was another neshama out there who the Rambam tells us that if somebody's killed because he's Jewish, he's a kadosh, whether even if he was a rasha like your Ravam ben Avat, it makes no difference whatsoever, which led to a question that was raised in the Shoah after the Kovna ghetto had a major, what they called an action with the Nazis, they murdered 10,000 people in one day. And they asked Rav Oshri, who was this young 30-year-old Rav in the ghetto of Kovna, who, Chazdei Hashem, survives, and he comes to the States, and he publishes 6 volumes called Shelot Uchuvot Mima Amakim, which was Chuvot that he wrote, spoke to people when he was on the scene. And this was one of the questions that was asked. If the Rambam says that the person who's killed because he's Jewish, he's a kadosh, so then maybe there's no need even to say Kaddish. Because one of the reasons to say Kaddish is that it's a defense for the neshama. So Rav Oshri knew that in the 14th century, after one of the major pogroms, that shaila was already asked. And the response was to say Kaddish because there are other reasons why we say Kaddish. And one is it's therapeutic for the mourners. Very therapeutic for the mourners. First of all, it's an expression of tziduk hadin, of just swallowing it and accepting it, and that's not easy. It's a bitter pill to swallow. Tzatzur tamim pa'alo ki chol derachav mishpat el emunah ve'ein avel tzadik v'yasharu. Just tell the Kadosh Baruch Hu, you're right. What do you mean you're right? I mean, it's hard. It's a hard thing. There's justice here. We don't understand that justice. And you're willing to swallow that bitter pill by saying Yitkadel v'kadesh. It's an expression. Plus, it also is very helpful, and I know this from people who went through great tragedies. The saying of Kaddish is on some level therapeutic. And on different levels for different people, for sure. So that's what Rav Oshri said to those people. And as it was, they all said Kaddish together. He said it was a horrific sound to listen to everybody. So ein bayit asher ein somet. There was no family that didn't suffer a loss that day, and And that's what it was. And that's why it's important to say Kaddish even for such people. If I'm looking at source number 12, source number 10 and source number 12, I'll get back to 11 soon. Source number 10 and source number 12, it's one out of Yirmiyahu and one out of Yeshayahu. I mean, if you daven 3 times a day, even if you daven once a day, you can't miss the fact that the bracha of Rifa'enu comes out of Yirmiyahu, and the bracha of Hashiva Shaftenu Kvar Rishonah comes out of Yeshayahu. So it says, Rifa'eni Hashem ve'ei rafei, Hoshi'eni ve'i vasheha, ki tehilati ata. Now, the context of Yirmiyahu Perek Yud Zayin is not physical health, but it's spiritual health. It's refu'ah, meaning spiritual, getting back to one's spiritual health. In another word, it's tshuva, it's repentance, and so on. So the Gemara actually has different opinions as to what the bracha of Rifa'enu that we say. Now, we've adopted that Rifa'enu is for physical health. We even have in small print in some of the Siddurim a little add-on to personalize Rifa'enu. Iyar atzav fanecha Hashem Elokai ve'Elokei avotai shetishlach me'ira lefuah shelemen v'shamayim lechole ploini ben ploini, whoever it is, betoch sha'ar chole OUisrael. So you can highly personalize it, and you should know when you do something like that, your entire Shmoneh Esrei is better. Because you don't want to overrun, you don't want to shoot over the bracha because you're davening too fast, and you daven every other bracha with a little bit more kavanah, a little bit more attention, and it becomes a better Shmoneh Esrei. So much so that I was involved in high school education in Chashmonaim. So one of the big problems was how do you motivate high school kids to daven properly? It's you become a robot, and Chazal knew that it's a problem. That when the fact that they standardized the text, so inevitably, it becomes something that just Chat Shtayim Shalosh, 1, 2, 3, and you go through it. The only way to make Shmoneh Esrei, any particular Shmoneh Esrei, into something that's very relevant is to personalize it and to recognize that there is a particular issue that you want to bring to Kadosh Baruch Hu's attention, and you can do it in Shema Koleinu. Before we say Ki ata shomea tfilat kol peh or Ki ata shomea tfilat amcha Yisrael Rachamim, in any language, in any form, you can just unload what you want to say to Kadosh Baruch Hu and get it out. And if a person is preparing that kind of speech to Kadosh Baruch Hu for Shema Koleinu, so from the first bracha on, the whole Shmoneh Esrei is much better. Because you're talking to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and you're waiting to get to that bracha, and now you're going to say it, and you say, Ki ata shomea tfilat kol peh amcha Yisrael b'rachamim, Baruch ata Hashem shomea tfilah, and you move on, and you have a good feeling that at least you communicated something to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So what I would do in the yeshiva, I would sometimes have kids tell us up front if there's any burning issue in their families. Some grandfather's having an operation, something, somebody got through, there was an accident, somebody's hurt, some chayal, and we'd bring it to the attention of the entire yeshiva, and this boy, is in Kita Yud, and this one's in Kita Chet, and this one's in Kita Yud Bet, whatever it is, and we're all going to daven together, and here's the name, and get it in, and so on. And the kids told me afterwards how much more improved their davening was because the Shmoneh Esrei became personalized. So there is an issue of trying to do this on a regular basis, and you shouldn't think that everything's hunky-dory. Well, if you think everything's hunky-dory, line up, and I'll tell you what's not so hunky-dory here today. And there's what to daven for. There's plenty of things to daven for, both on a personal level and on a collective level. So that for sure. So Rifa'enu that we say is very much the bracha of good health, and no question, good health is something that we require. Now we say it in the plural. Yirmiyahu has it Rifa'eni Hashem ve'ei rafei. He's talking in the singular. So I used the kibbutz. I said that Yirmiyahu was a Galtziana, and he said Rifa'eni. If you know how Galtzianas daven, that's how it would sound like. But he wasn't a Galtziana. We have changed the language to plural, and you see why in source number 11. Source number 11 talks about Tfilat HaDerech. If you look at source number 11, Ve'amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rav Chizda. Rabbi Yaakov, the name of Rav Chizda. Kol hayotzei laderech, whoever travels, tzarich litpalel Tfilat HaDerech. Ought to daven Tfilat HaDerech. In a moment we'll say when and why and how. My Tfilat HaDerech. What is the text? Yiratzon Fanecha Hashem Elokai, Shetolicheni L'Shalom, Tatzideni L'Shalom, Tismacheni L'Shalom, Tatzileni Mikav Kol Oyev V'Orev Baderech. Kadosh Baruch Hu should guard over me, should protect me from all types of dangers lurking. Tishlach Bracha B'Masayadai, V'Tetneni L'Chen L'Cheser Rachmim Be'einecha U'Be'einei Kol Ra'ai, Baruch Atah Hashem Shomei Tefillah. Everything is in singular, if you caught that. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, the Amora Abaye says, L'olam yishatef inish nafshei ba'adei tzibura. You should join your private tefillah with the community, with the tzibur. Heichi neima, how should we say it? Yirotzav fanecha Hashem Elokeinu, shetolichenu l'shalom, and so on. That's how we do it. Our tefillat derech is in the plural. Shetolichenu shalom, tatzidenu shalom, v'tageinu l'mchos chavseinu, and so on. The idea is two things. One is, there are people out there who didn't say Tfilat HaDerech, who deserve a Kadosh Baruch Hu's protection on the road. And we have an obligation to daven for those who aren't davening. So we had a president in Israel, Ezer Weizmann. He had a lot of zchuyot, don't get me wrong. And I remember one of his interesting zchuyot was when he became president. I mean, he was not a religious person by any standards. Besides that, and it's not Lashon Hara to say it. It was open. He admitted it and everything. But when he became president, he announced at a press conference that as president of Israel, he will not be Mechalel Shabbat publicly. Now that's an important halacha, by the way, because even though most other averot, it makes not a bit of a difference if you eat, chazer privately or publicly. It's the same eating chazer. Shabbos, there is a difference between mechalel Shabbat b'farhesya in the public or privately. Because a person's mechalel Shabbat b'farhesya, so there are all kinds of add-ons. We're not going to drink his wine, and it's a very serious matter. The Rav once explained that it's a negation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu creating the world. It's like negating the testimony of Vaychulu Shamayim, and so on. So Mechalel Shabbat B'Fayesya is very serious. And here the President of Israel says, look, the country has religious, not religious. I'm representing all the country, so I won't be Mechal Shabbos B'Fayesya. So a reporter asked him, Ezer, that's what he used to talk in singular, Ezer, you're going to daven also? Tatit Palel, you're going to daven? So he looks at his private secretary, whose name was Ari Schumer, who was a boy with a fellow with a kippah. He says, Ari davens for me. And everybody laughed. And it says, Niba v'lo yada maniba. Sometimes somebody prophesies, doesn't even know how smart he was in that prophecy. Ezer didn't even realize what he said was absolutely correct. That's what people who are Shomrei Torah Mitzvot assume the responsibility of trying to catch the mitzvah performance not only for themselves but also for others. And this is arevut. We're in this together. There's a Kol Yisrael Arevim Zebazeh. We are Arevim. We are co-signers on the Masoret. And therefore, if somebody's not davening, we have to daven for them too. And here the Gemara in source number 11, Masech Brachot says, if we're traveling, there are other travelers out there, and not everybody must probably say Tfilat HaDerech. So we ought to say it in plural and cover our bases not only for ourselves but also for the other daveners. And I also say a lot of times it's the guy coming right opposite you. So just to make sure that why do I say guy opposite you? Most accidents on the road happen very close to the city. And it doesn't happen from the person who left the city. It happens to the person who's coming back to the city, because after being on the road for a half hour, an hour and a half, sometimes you just lose yourself right before you get into the city because you're almost there and you do something very, very stupid and causing an accident. So when you leave the city, you have to say Tfilas HaDerech also for the guy coming back. It's very important that he's covered as well. So while it's important to have car insurance, we also have divine insurance. We have to have a Kadosh Baruch Hu's protection for Tfilat HaDerech. So the question is, when do you say Tfilat HaDerech? The Gemara says, Ad Parsa. Parsa is a measure which is approximately 3 or 4 kilometers. So the only question is, what does that mean when the Gemara says Ad Parsa? Some poskim say, you only say Tfilat HaDerech when you've left the city, the Parsa measure, which means only 3 or 4 kilometers outside the city, do you start saying Tfilat HaDerech. In the case of going from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv, it's like when you get to the turn of Moza, going up the hill to Vaseret, and so on. But there are other views amongst the great poskim. One is Maharam Marutenberg. Maharam Marutenberg says, you say Tfilat HaDerech the minute you leave your house. What is the parsa? That the trip is at least 3-4 kilometers worth of travel. If you're going less than 3-4 kilometers of travel, then you don't have to say Tfilat HaDerech. But if you're going more than 3-4 kilometers, you ought to say Tfilat HaDerech. But you say it the minute you left your house. The Rav adopted that opinion, but he said you don't have to say it the minute you left your house, but the minute you leave the city limits, because our custom is not to say Tfilat HaDerech in the city, even though it's not a bad idea. But you know that it's 4,000 times safer to fly a plane than to get into the car. You know that? It's not even close. So all these people who are so nervous about flying, they should know that. Right, the president of Iran. Well, I wasn't talking about helicopters, He went in a helicopter. Yeah. She'll be a kapara for all of Klal Yisrael. Him and the Sarah Chutz. By the way, his foreign minister was a bigger Sonny Yisrael than the president. Mamish Sonny Yisrael. They were all Sonny Yisrael. They should be a kapara. This is a classic case of malachta naaset ayudei acherim. Kadosh Baruch Hu took care of something for us that was very positive. I mean, it says benefol o yivcha al tismach. When your enemy falls, so don't make a kiddush. But nevertheless, should I tell you what I thought would happen? We have 4 different measures of capital punishment. Skila, Sreifa, Hereg, and Chenek, which is stoning, which meant they threw the person off a mountain first, and probably died from that, and burning, and decapitation, and asphyxiation. I think they had all 4. I really think they had all 4. I really think so. I'm not even joking about this. I think what happened in that was all 4. If they didn't get it from the klop, they got it from the asphyxiation and smoke and the burning, and the bodies were completely disheveled. They got it all. It was skila, sreifa, hereg, and chenek all in once. I mean, you got to hand it to Kadosh Baruch Hu how he did this. It was a big time. It was a big time. All right, so that's a parsha b'fnei atzma. But the idea of what the Rav said was to say Tfilat HaDerech the minute you leave the city, in line of the opinion of the Maram Rutberg. There was another opinion that said that the Ad Parsa actually meant if you're traveling for a long distance and you forgot to say Tfilat HaDerech, but you still have 3-4 kilometers yet to travel, and you're not within the destination of 3 or 4 kilometers, you can still say Tfilat HaDerech on the road in the middle. But if you're already within 3-4 kilometers to your destination, so you're almost there already, so forget about it. You'll say it on the way home. But so there are different opinions on how to take the Tfilat HaDerech. But if you look at source number 12, we're going to end with source number 12 today, which is V'ashiva shoftach v'oshana v'yotzach v'achila achrechen yikarei lach ira tzedek kirya ne'emana. This is from Yeshayahu. We're familiar with these psukim from the Haftarah of Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, Shabbat Chazon. So there, the minhag, the custom in Ashkenaz, is to read the Haftarah in the Mangina, in the Nigun of Eicha, right? And that puts you into the frame of mind and into the proper emotion of the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. Except when the Baal Koreh gets to the last psukim, he goes back to the standard reading. Ve'yashiva shoftayich k'varich ona v'yotzayich v'achila acharechen yikarei lach ira tzedek kirya ne'emana tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveha b'tzedakah. So the V'ashiva shoftayich k'roshana, which we use in our bracha, Hashiva shoftenu k'roshana, which has to do with the restitution of the reconstitution of the Sanhedrin. So the Rambam, in source number 13, in his Mishnah commentary, tells us something phenomenal. That the idea of the reconstitution of Sanhedrin is a necessary prerequisite to the coming of Mashiach. So we still have to do it. It's on our agenda. So if you open up the Gemara in Masechet Megillah, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Bet, so there you have the sequential order of the daily Shmones, and you have Barech Aleinu, which is the revival of agriculture in Eretz Yisrael, and then you have Tekah b'shofar gadol lecherutenu, which is kibbutz goliot. There'll be no use to have agriculture being revived in Eretz Yisrael if Am Yisrael is not going to be here. So you have kibbutz goliot, the ingathering of the exiles, and then you have a shiva shoftenu kvar shana, the reformation of the smicha of old and the Sanhedrin, and then only afterwards you have Yerushalayim Mecha and Tzemach David. No, the Sanhedrin part is an integral part of the process of the Geula. So the Rambam tells us in source number 13, towards the end, where it says Vani Omer, Vani Savur, I believe, Shas Sanhedrin Tashuv Lifnei Hitgalut HaMashiach. The Sanhedrin will return before the Mashiach will arrive. This will be one of its signs. as it says, "Ve'ashiva shavtach v'oshana v'yosach v'achila," and only afterwards, "Acharechein," only afterwards, "Yikarei lach yirat tzedek." V'zeh b'li safek, that will happen. Kasher yachshir Hashem libot b'nei adam, where people are going to have their hearts in the right place. Yirbu b'maaseh hatov, there will be an abundance of good deeds. Tigdal chukatam l'Hashem, their thirst will be and desires will be to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu u'leTorato. I'm not sure we're 100% there, but I think we're moving towards that. V'it Rabbi Yisharam, and they're going to be all very straight and honest. Lifnei bo HaMashiach, kemo shenitpa'er b'psukei HaMikra, as the psukim in Tanakh foretell. Now, as the Rambam tells us that there's good reason why we have a Shiva Shavteinu in the Shmoneh Esrei, what we're looking for, and it precedes the official rebuilding of Yerushalayim and the coming of Mashiach. It's a stage. And therefore, that led the Rambam to suggest how in the world we could possibly reconstitute the smicha, where there's no procedure in the halacha how to do so. And the Rambam manufactures a way, and he says, if a convention of all Rabbanim of Eretz Yisrael get together, and they decide on the first candidate, they all have it together, the first candidate, that would constitute the giving of that person smicha. He then would be able to put together two others on his side, and they would be able to have a beit din and make the next person with smicha, and you build it up till 71. So why don't we have it? Because they can't get together who's the first one. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Sfaradi, Ashkenazi? Is it going to be a Misnagid? Is it going to be a Chassid? And a Chassid, which Chassid? It's going to be from Vishnitz, from Belz, from Sanz, from Chabad. Who's it going to be? Until Am Yisrael gets its act together, who's going to be the first accepted candidate is not going to happen. There were a handful of people who were very accepted by all sides. I'll give you a name. He may not be the most famous, but I'm talking about Rav Zevin Zatzal, who was the editor of the Encyclopedia Talmudit. He was just accepted by all sides. There were those who were accepted by all sides. I mean, Bab Rebbe was accepted by many, but you should know he still had some misnagdim, some opponents, no doubt, sharp opponents. But there were people who were very accepted by all sides. Even a person like Rav Steinsaltz was somebody who was accepted by so many different chugim and so on. Okay, next week in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll still use this page, but I may also hand out a different page for next week. So if you want to hand it back to me, fine. If not, you can bring it next week. And we should have a good week. We should have B'sorot Tovot.